podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Sports fans, come experience the FanDuel Sportsbook at Live Casino and Hotel for all your sports betting action. The ultimate place for any sports enthusiast. Take advantage of our 24/7 kiosks, massive video screens, and watch all the action from the best seat in the house. Make every moment more at the all-new FanDuel Sportsbook at Live Casino and Hotel in Hanover, Maryland. Please play responsibly. Gambling problem? Please call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit mdgamblinghelp.org.
Welcome to the Love Tennis Podcast with me, James Gray of iNewspaper and iNews.co.uk. This is the mid-first week of French Open pod. We need a name for it, really. The second round is over, or all but over, I should say. We've still got Alizé Cornet versus Jelena Ostapenko to go, but given that we've already had all the other matches, it's felt like as good a time as any to get cracking. I'm joined by Calvin Betton, as I have been most of the week, and also George Belshaw has squeezed us into his notoriously busy schedule between various Downing Street parties that were meetings, work meetings that he's been at, to have a look back at the first 5 days of the French Open and also talk a little bit about the next couple. As always, if you want to leave us a review, we're very grateful that you can and that you choose to. We prefer that you leave 5-star reviews because, as I found out this week, when you get really personal in reviews, it actually sticks with you for quite a long time. So huge amounts of credit to JL Clerk for his review, creatively entitled Great Concept, Idiotic Presenter. Thanks very much, mate. Had a lovely day after that. But I should say thanks very much to Sachi R, who did say something nice. Fave Tennis Podcast. Somehow over the last couple of years has become my absolute favourite of the many I listen to. Great humour and banter, combined with expertise and informed opinion. Wish it was more than once a week. Also wish Calvin pronounced Nike correctly. Calvin, any response to that criticism of your chosen pronunciation of the famous sports brand?
I don't think there's anything wrong with my pronunciation. It doesn't have an accent on the E, and I will continue enjoying my Nike trainers. Funnily
enough, as an ancient Greek scholar, as I am, or at least was in my university days, the correct pronunciation is actually Nike, because that's the name of the goddess of victory. But when you tell people that, they tend to give you lots of other four-letter words that aren't Nike. So,
can we get into Adidas or Adidas as well?
No, but that's like a class thing, isn't it? Like, that's like a culture divide?
The thing that annoys me most about Adidas is that they insist on spelling their brand with like a small a at the start, regardless of what it is. That winds me up beyond belief. Like,
have I told you
it's a noun.
We'll get onto the tennis shortly, but have I told you my Asics story? So Asics, the trainer
sounds
brand.
Sounds great. I can't wait.
Asics, the trainer brand, which we all know. I don't think that's news. They sponsor Iga Swiatek, and I found out that the reason they're called Asics is because it stands for anime sana in corpore sano, which is the Latin phrase for healthy mind and healthy body. But actually, it's a quote from a poem, from a poet called Juvenal. And the quote is, mens sana in corpore sano, which is a different word for mind. But M6 isn't such a good name for a trainer brand, so they've just fudged the quote. I know, it's fascinating, isn't it? Honestly, this is the problem with podcasting, is that you can't get all the really interesting listeners going, oh, that is interesting, James. Thank you so much for sharing. You just get George and Calvin staring at you like you're a boring bastard.
Can I jump into our review section quickly and just say I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to the podlets this week, and I've really enjoyed
James's...
you
refused to come on them.
Because I've refused to come on, but it's been lovely. I've listened to like 2 in a row every 2 days or something, which I've quite enjoyed.
Can't
like
even
good length.
Squeeze like half an hour into his busy schedule to listen every morning. Unbelievable.
But I've enjoyed your kind of scene-setting things, James, as well. It sounds like you're having a lovely time. I'm glad you liked Simone Mathieu. I've been occasionally talking back to you both when I've been listening and then realising I'm not actually involved in the call. So I'm glad to be here to kind of say things today.
That is exceptional. Right, let's get on with some tennis, shall we? I don't really know where the best place to start is because we're going to try and go over 4 or 5 days of tennis. Maybe we look at the big players who've gone out over the last 4 or 5 days. Team, Ons Jabeur, Naomi Osaka, Barbara Krejcikova, Jo Wilfried Tsonga, Bianca Andreescu, Stan Wawrinka, Maria Sakkari, Simona Halep, Karolina Pliskova. That is the list of players we've lost. 7 of the top 10 WTA seeds have gone, albeit 11 to 20, I think, are almost entirely intact. Maybe let's start with Dominic Thiem, because I think that's probably the one we're all...
You didn't include Raducanu there as well.
Did I hear Muguruza either?
Oh, for goodness
and
sake.
Halep?
No, I did say Halep, actually.
You did say Halep. I misheard Halep.
Sorry, George. We've been doing these podcasts quite a while. You maybe just not quite up to speed.
Pretty off the
either
ball.
way, there's an enormous amount of them. As you say, Muguruza out in the first round as well. Emma Raducanu. I don't know. Maybe because that wasn't a shock to me, because Sasnovich is basically the world number 25 and Raducanu isn't. But anyway, that's for yesterday's podlet. If you haven't listened, please go and listen. Dominic Thiem out in the first round. 11 defeats in a row, George. It's starting to get painful, isn't it?
Yeah,
well, especially for you, because you thought you were going to win it.
Well, I have to finally admit that he wasn't ready to win the French Open, I suppose. Tough draw, to be fair. Hugo Dellien. He's a pretty gritty Bolivian, isn't he?
The word you're looking for is pusher.
Yeah, I mean,
tough draw. What would have been a decent draw?
I think that is framed in the context of it. Any draw is a tough draw for Thiem at the minute. Look, I feel for Thiem, and I think he's said he's kind of dropping down to challenges, hasn't he? For a bit now, I'm going to try and go and get some form back. That's not been uncommon with guys like Nishikori, Murray over the last couple of years. Wawrinka as well. But it feels almost worse to me than many of those, just because Thiem is a little bit younger than those guys. He kind of felt like he was right on top of the world. I was having this conversation of, you've been talking about my kind of social life this week, James. I've actually gone out with 3 different tennis fans this week and had a wide range of tennis conversations to kind of fill the void in my life. And we were talking a little bit about Thiem. I've completely lost where I was going to go with that now.
Good, you're in top form, George. I have to say, you brought so much to this pod. Calvin, are you worried that we're never going to see Dominic Thiem properly on the tennis court ever again?
I think there's a fair chance that we won't. I think there's a fair chance that at the top level he may be done in terms of winning slams, and even in the top 10. I'd now be at the stage where I'd say I'd be surprised if he gets back into the top 10 in the world.
I think the problem is, and when we talk about Dominic Thiem, we always just talk about his backhand just because it's very pretty. It's a very good-looking stroke. But actually, the reality is, at his best, he had one of the best forehands in the world. Like, it was an incredible weapon. And because of this wrist injury, he's had to completely change the way he hits it. And it's not a weapon anymore. When you take away a player's biggest weapon, what have they got left? Like, not very much.
Yeah, I think he's similar to Stan Wawrinka in that front. They're similar players, actually, aren't they? In that everybody talked about his backhand, but I think there was some stat that for every backhand winner that Wawrinka hits, he hits 7 forehand winners.
Right.
So it's nowhere near comparison, and I think Thiem's the same. But yeah, I don't see the thing with his forehand was its heaviness, how hard he could hit it with the spin that he hit as well. And with a change of grip that he's had to put in there, which I find strange because his original injury was nothing to do with his wrist, was it? It was a foot injury.
Yeah, it was a later injury,
why he stopped. But he's never going to get that heaviness with the grip he's got now.
I've recollected my thoughts and remembered where I was going. There's a bit of a weird curse for guys who kind of end the year as like the main challenger to the top 2 over like the last 6 years. I was kind of just thinking about this week. Like Thiem, he'd won the US Open, looked really strong. You'd probably say he's the best guy outside of Rafa and Novak. Just drops off a cliff. It's happened to guys like Raonic. It's happened to, Dimitrov finished 1 year world number 3 after winning the ATP finals. I think there's like a weird curse going on over the last 6 years of like guys who suddenly finish at 3 and then just collapse.
I have a slightly stronger theory than your tin hat, which I'm assuming is coming. I was just waiting for the, isn't this a conspiracy? But I think it's because after the US Open, more often than not, unless there's something really, unless there's a tight race for one, you see a lot of guys just bin it for the season. how often does Rafa Nadal play? How many tournaments does Rafa Nadal play after the US Open, if any? Similarly, Federer or Djokovic some years has taken. There's the the Shanghai Masters was always in that slot, and then the Paris Masters. I mean, there have been some weird winners of Paris Bercy because a lot of guys don't play it. Jack Sock won the Paris Masters, need I remind you?
But I'm not talking just about kind of an end of season form. I mean, literally finishing world number 3 and kind of feeling like a massive challenger at the top. Raonic always sticks out in my mind. I remember watching him back into that year. He was comfortably the 3rd best player in the world. He'd been to the final of Wimbledon, and he played some great matches against Novak and Murray in that year. That then Murray and Novak finished the tournament playing for world number 1. He was fantastic. He was pushing them to some of the longest matches in ATP finals history, and then just gone. Literally, he's never come anywhere close to that again. And I don't know, it feels weird that teams going to go potentially in that direction. I think he's way better player than Raonic, don't get me wrong, but there are players who just seem to finish a year strong, become world number 3, and then the exertion to get there then just kind of kills them. And the only constant that remains is Novak and Rafa just at the top.
I think Raunic's a bit different, because I've said before on the pod that Raonic falls into that category of exceptionally tall guys who play explosive sports in an explosive way. They tend not to have long careers. It's not conducive to being able to do that. They will get injured sooner or later because of that. Del Potro and Raonic is obviously the same. The guys who are tall and don't play so explosive, they tend to last a bit longer. But yeah, that's one thing on that. I think with Thiem, I'd say Thiem's a bit similar to another guy who put everything in and got to world number 1. He's similar to Murray in that they just put their bodies through so much in order to at different stages. So Thiem's obviously, as is well discussed, he's just played too much tennis. He's burnt out. I think that's fair to say. Burnt out later than what you normally associate with burnout, but his body has just broken down through years and years of just playing way too much tennis. And Murray kind of did the same, didn't he? It's kind of considered that Murray just went hell for leather at the end of that year. Was it 2016?
He started, to end of 2016, he added all these tournaments to his schedule because he recognised the opportunity to pip Djokovic to end of year number 1. And he threw all his eggs into one basket. And I've absolutely no doubt that that's why we are where we are today with Murray.
Yeah, and I wonder if you spoke to him whether he would take that.
100% no.
Do you not think?
I really don't.
He might not ever have been world number 1.
I think that was massive for him at the time. I mean, that's a really big achievement. We've spoken about that and winning slams, etc. I think if he'd not got to world number 1.
Oh, sorry, as in he would be happy with the decisions that he made.
Yeah, would if he could go back again, would he play the same tournaments to guarantee? Even say it this way, if you took him down and said sort of miracle question, if you could go back and play the same schedule and get to world number 1, or you'd now be fit, but you'd never get to world number 1.
Yeah, I think that's tough. I just think knowing Murray, I know for a fact that he wouldn't question the stuff that he did in the past that much. I think he would back his own decision because he's stubborn like that. But yeah, it is a difficult question, isn't it?
It's weird though, because he didn't actually break down at the start of it. It's not like he did that and then he was in pieces. The year after that, he played until Wimbledon. It was the Wimbledon match against Querrey that knackered him, wasn't it?
But if you remember,
the problem was in the French, I think, didn't he?
Against
Wawrinka. Yeah.
The whole of the build up to that Wimbledon was dominated by, is Andy Murray going to play? We had people standing on ladders and peering over fences to watch him practice to find out if he was fit or not. It was crazy.
And the start of the year was awful as well. I mean, and I think that's almost been consigned to history that he was the worst ever kind of statistical world number 1 for ages, which kind of felt totally unfair on Murray.
He did decent at the Aussie, didn't he?
He lost 4th round to Misha Zverev, right?
Oh, was that year? Okay.
Yeah, it was statistically, I think the worst ever world number 1.
I'll run you through the start to his 2017. He won the title in Doha. He lost in the final in Doha.
To Djokovic.
Lost to Misha Zverev in the 4th round, as you quite rightly say. He then won the title in Dubai, and then kind of had a sort of fairly standard clay season where he had a decent run at Barcelona but didn't go very far anywhere else. And then, as you say, the semi-final against Stan in Roland Garros. And then he lost to Jordan Thompson at Queen's. So the writing was on the wall, unfortunately. Let's move on because we've got lots of other exits. We're going to spend the whole of the first half of this podcast talking about what's gone on over the last 5 days, and then we'll look at some draws and talk about what might be coming up. Ons Jabeur, Calvin and I talked about quite extensively when it happened, but she obviously went out in the first round. George, you did semi-predict this result. Where is Ons Jabeur? And we can talk about Maria Sakkari at the same time. She lost in 2 tight sets to Karolina Muchova. I would kind of characterise those results both similarly because they are both sort of slightly tricky clay court opponents, but if Ons Jabeur and Maria Sakkari want to be the players we think they are, they have to win those matches.
I think it's a little harsher on Sakkari, to be honest. I really rate Muchova. I think she's a really good player. I think she is capable of being a top 10 player. I don't think Magna Linette is. I did kind of feel that might be an awkward match. I know we kind of joke about me kind of sitting on the fence all the time. I do like to cover all bases, so I picked her in fantasy, but also did say she might lose first 2 rounds. So I can't claim it was my greatest prediction. But yeah, I mean, it's just someone you don't really want to see first round of the French either. But yeah, I was disappointed for Jabeur, to be honest, because it felt like she was coming in with such great momentum, obviously, having reached the finals of those 2 events. Sakkari, I didn't feel quite had the form to necessarily go on and win this title. But equally, that said, you're kind of hoping her experience would kind of come through. And a 2 sets loss in Muchova where it's come down to 2 tie breaks isn't like a terrible result. I'm not looking at that like that's a damning result for Sakkari. I think that's a hard draw against a player who's kind of coming back and rise up. So yeah, a bit disappointing from the women's side of things. But as we'll come on to later with their draw, like that, actually there's quite a lot of... I'm actually still very interested in the bottom half of the draw. I think there's suddenly some of the players who I really wanted to get there are potentially going to have a breakthrough slam. So people like Coco Gauff still kicking around could do some damage. So yeah, I'm not too worried about the women's draw, despite the sadness for Jabeur, who deserved better, to be honest, after such a great clay season.
We also lost Barbara Krejcikova, which we mentioned. She has actually, interestingly, albeit, I mean, I don't know if interesting is the right word, she has pulled out the doubles now because she has tested positive for COVID. You'll remember that Krejcikova said she hit a wall physically, and we all kind of went, well, yeah, love, you haven't played for 3 months. Like, of course you have. But I suspect that now we're looking at, she was actually probably feeling the effects of COVID at the time, and has, as I say, now tested positive and pulled out. We also lost Bianca Andreescu from the women's draw. She was pretty heavily beaten by Belinda Bencic, who, in fairness, has been playing well and is playing well on clay. Calvin, I know you were pretty impressed with how Bianca Andreescu is looking now. Has that defeat to Belinda Bencic changed your thoughts on how far she can go at the moment?
No, I don't think so. I think it's more of a mindset thing with Andreescu. If she stays in the same mindset, I think she'll be competing at... we don't really know how well she plays on grass, do we? But I don't see any reason why she shouldn't be good on grass. So I think she'll be decent competing there, and we know what she can do at the US Open. So if she stays in the same mindset, I would expect that she'll be very competitive going forward.
George, Bianca on grass?
Yeah, I did a column with her before last Wimbledon, I think. Possibly the last WTA ghostwriting column I did, maybe. Anyway, and I think I'm right in saying she's never won a match at Wimbledon, unless she did win one last year, but she's certainly never gone very far.
No, she's played twice and lost in the first round in 2017 and 2021. Alizé Cornet she lost to last year. And in
that was a good match, actually.
She lost to Kristina Kukovic.
I think we went to go and watch that Cornet match, James. You and I.
think we all certainly
sit
did.
On court.
On court number 2, which is, of course, my favourite court.
11 a.m. start.
That's my second favourite
hour
court,
in the day.
So we hope to see more of Bianca Andreescu, nevertheless. From today, we lost Karolina Pliskova. She lost 2-2 she did not look herself on any level. But she lost to Leolia Jean-Jean, who is a 26-year-old French wildcard with quite an amazing story. She was kind of anointed as the new queen of French tennis when she was a kid. The FFT gave her a full-time coach at 12. She had a 10-year contract with Nike or Nike. And then she had a massive knee injury. She didn't play a professional tennis match for 5 years. She went to college in America to do her studies. It was there that she started playing a bit of tennis again. She studied finance. She said she went over, she put on a lot of weight, and then she got back into tennis, and it sort of helped. And she was basically just grinding for a ranking. And I think she was still ranked outside the top 1,000 when the pandemic started. And then she was doing like a minimum wage job in the pandemic. And then pretty much 2021, went from no ranking to about 300. Won a 60k or a 25k a couple of weeks ago. And then got a wild card into Wimbledon, the French Open. And here she is. She won in the first round, and she's now into the third round. And it was amazing to listen to her in press afterwards. She was really sniffly, and I wondered if she was ill. But she said, "No, I just had a really big cry," which is understandable because she was saying stuff like, "This means I can get a coach. Like I can go to tournaments further away," because she's just won 150 grand essentially. Calvin, you know a lot of players at kind of that level where life is hard. I can only imagine what a run like that, which is a dream run, what a difference that makes to someone's career.
It's a game changer, and like she said, the main difference is you can have a coach, but also you can play the tournaments that you really want to play. And I think that I've experienced a lot over the last few years with players where you'll see it's easy to say this player should be ranked higher and that kind of thing. But if you can have a schedule and you can choose any of the tournaments that you want to play anywhere in the world for as long as you want, and you're not under pressure to be, I coached a very talented player a few years ago, and it's only when I spoke to him after I'd stopped working with him just this year, actually, that he said that he just, because we didn't have much money, he didn't have much money to work with, that every time he went away on, could only afford a 2-week trip or something like that, that there was so much pressure on him to do well in those 2 weeks. Whereas other players with if you've got the money that you can plan for a whole year, those 2 weeks are not as important. It's not heaped upon you so much. So yeah, it's a game changer. I'd completely forgot about John. I remember her from when she was younger. And I think a mate of mine might have interviewed her on a now defunct podcast a couple of years ago. And it was quite an interesting interview, but if it's the one I think it is, I'll try and find it and maybe post a link or something.
I was just going to say, I'm sure we'll come on to this a bit later, but this is again the sort of run that we're talking about being majorly missed at Wimbledon next year in terms of what an impact it could have on their career. Like obviously the money's one side of thing, but she's going to jump about 120 rankings just so far. I mean, that's a really horrible thing. Imagine doing that at Wimbledon and then just suddenly not having that massive career step. So yeah, I just thought
But it's also relevant that like the main thing she talked about was the cash. Like, I said to her, she was kind enough to do some questions in English after the many questions in French, as you can imagine. And I said to her, I think you're up to 149 in the world now, so like, see you at Wimbledon qualies. And she kind of hadn't necessarily quite realised that that's what it meant. And she was like, yeah, I'll definitely be there. Like, that there was no question for her that the lack of ranking points is going to make a blind bit of difference to playing Wimbledon qualies, where of course I think you get £8,000 for losing in the first round.
She can't be far off main draw if she wins one more match. So
well, exactly.
I mean, I watched quite a bit of the match with Pliskova today, and I've seen her before, but years ago. But I think one of the things that stands out is you get players, for example, like Caroline Pliskova, who look like they've been trained to play tennis, and it's sort of manufactured. And then you get players every so often who look like they were just born to play, and she's one of those players.
Yeah,
that you can't go through what she's gone through, and then come back and be that good unless there's some inherent talent within you that you were just born to play the game.
I think also it gives you something more. when you know what the game means to you, when you haven't just played tennis all your life. Andrei Rublev, for example, it strikes me as the ultimate tennis bot. Like, he has only ever played tennis. He doesn't really know anything else. And, God bless him, like, he's pretty open about that to a certain extent. When we're talking about the politics stuff, he said, look, I really don't know, and I think we all bought that. And, he has massive temper tantrums on the court, and she said that she used to get really angry on the court, and usually does, but has sort of managed to control it this week. And I really do think that once you know what tennis means not to have in your life, it changes what it means to have it back in your life again. And I think it's something, it changes what you do on the court.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate, and it's something that, to be honest, I'll be quite open about it, that as a coach, I kind of go through it as well. And it's not always when the results don't go as you want. They can be down moments. But what I often find as well, and I think players do, is that when you win at the end of the week, there's also a bit of emptiness there as well, because that's it. Yeah, we've won. So what? And it's like you. It's a strange, empty feeling. And I guess, yeah, if you do have other things like she may have, it's not. You don't get so much of that.
Yeah, I mean, Dominic Thiem talked about that after he won the US Open. He said, I felt so empty, and like everything that went with that. And I actually don't think that had much of an effect on what happened after that. But nevertheless, something that does happen. Actually, when I spoke to Iga Swiatek's performance analyst, she said a lot of people spend a lot of time preparing for what happens when you fail. A lot of people don't think about what happens when you succeed, and like all the different sort of kind of mental framework that you need with that. So yeah, very interesting. There's some lovely moped riders in Paris, as you can just hear going past my window. Garbine Muguruza went out early on as well. Kaya Kanepi, the ultimate giant killer. I mean, Kaya Kanepi's basically like, I'm trying to think who's a really good cup team, like a traditionally great cup team. Bradford City have got a bit of a reputation of being a great cup team, but she really is just the ultimate. I honestly think that I know players say they don't look at draws, but they must desperately just hope that when eventually they do bother looking at the draw, they go, where's Kanepi? Where's Kanepi? Great, nowhere near me, because she just keeps on doing it. Albeit, I did kind of predict that Garbine Muguruza was ripe.
There's some amazing stats around kind of Kanepi's slam record against top 10 players versus her record against top 10 players outside the slams over the last 3 years. I can't remember the exact numbers. It's almost like she's won more than she's lost against top 10 players in the slams, and only won once against a top 10 player not in the slams, or something like that. I'm sure James can probably find it pretty quickly and confirm.
Oh yeah, because those parameters aren't like too specific for me to just magically Google.
I actually, Kai Kanepi is a strange one, because I actually spent my last birthday randomly watching Kai Kanepi play tennis because she had I was in Estonia at a tournament in Estonia, and I think she must have some deal where, because it was in one of the bigger clubs in Estonia, where she agrees to play the 25k despite being in the top 100 in the world.
Right.
So I think if you look on your little thing, James, that you will see that Kanepi on the week of 3rd of August last year, she was playing in 25k or even maybe a 15k in Estonia.
Remarkable.
James, I've done your job. I've found the stat.
Talk to me.
So, Kanepi versus top 10 players at Grand Slams since Wimbledon 2010, won 9, lost 7. Very respectable against top 10 players. Kaya Kanepi versus top 10 players outside of Grand Slams since Wimbledon 2010, won 4, lost 18.
I mean, why bother? Like, why bother putting in the performances? Just save it for the big,
I love it.
For the big stage. Yeah, it's incredible. I'm fully on board for that. And I hope that she doesn't get into the top 32 in the world, because that would ruin it, and then she'd be seeded. I desperately need her to remain an unseeded player, so we can just, when Wimbledon comes around, we can just go and find Kaya Kanepi's opponent. It's worth mentioning today that Simone Halep went out to, and I apologise for pronunciation, Zheng Qinwen, the talented Chinese player who I know a lot of people have got a lot of time for. Some quite concerning moments in the third set when Halep turned to the umpire and said, "Can you get the trainer? I'm having trouble breathing." We kind of thought, is this another, maybe someone who's got COVID or she's ill? She came into press. Well, I thought she might not do press. She was then scheduled for 7:45. She wasn't there, and then they said delayed change of time. But she came in at 8:45, and she did speak to the media, and she clarified that it wasn't illness. She didn't have COVID, but she was actually having a panic attack on court. She said, "I didn't expect it because it was a panic attack. It happened," and she smiled. She said, "I didn't know how to handle it because I don't have it often. I don't really know why it happened because I was leading the match. I was playing well, but it just happened. As I said, I lost it. I couldn't focus. After that, the match was pretty tough, but now I'm good and I recovered and I learned from this episode. Not like anything dangerous in my opinion, but it happened." Pretty amazing to have someone, well, for that to happen. I mean, not amazing. It's obviously, anyone who's ever had a panic attack knows it's absolutely terrifying to lose control of your body like that. But I mean, George, it's amazing that it can happen and then she can just talk about it at least.
Yeah, definitely. It must be. She did quite well to complete the match, to be honest. I mean, quite often people who have them, it's clearly something she's had before and kind of had experience of, and kind of was able to keep herself together. Because if that was happening for the first time, you can imagine that being absolutely terrifying, and you probably retire straight away. Because you're like, what on earth's happening to my body? Yeah, it's supposed to be an incredibly kind of debilitating thing. I'm watching The Sopranos at the minute, for example, which I know is obviously a fictional program, but that features a lot of panic attacks. I know Calvin.
Do they have a thing at the end? Do they have a thing at the end where it's like, if you've been affected by any of the issues in this deeply violent and brutal show, then please just deal with it, because we're Italian Americans and we don't really do talking about feelings. Yeah, it's anyway. I mean, obviously, like, all the best to Simona Halep, and I'm glad to hear that she's feeling okay and that she's had a chance to calm down and get her heart rate under control, and the doctors had checked her over and made sure everything was fine. Coming up next, we'll talk a bit more about the upcoming third and fourth round. We'll look at how the Brits got on as well, and we will answer the question: why wasn't Irina-Camelia Begu disqualified? So, we are down to one Brit standing, which I have to say, for Thursday night, the French Open probably isn't a bad result. Dan Evans, in the last couple of minutes, or last couple of hours, I suppose, was beaten by Mikael Ymer, the Swede, in 4 sets. He dropped serve. He lost 5 of the first 6 games, but then did rally, but still lost the first set. He then won the second. Ymer took the third, and then Evans was a break-up in the 4th set, but then lost 5 games on the spin once again to drop the match in 4 sets. He explained afterwards that he's had a chest infection since about last Tuesday. I mean, he was very ill on the court. It actually made me feel quite ill, because he was, he said afterwards, he said, you don't want to be spitting on the court, but he was obviously like extremely phlegmy and he was coughing his guts up, and yeah, overall it was pretty unpleasant. And credit to him, it was a long match. I mean, I haven't got the exact timing in front of me, but it was a 4-set match, and there were several games over 10 minutes. It was hard work, to say the least. 4 sets took 3 hours, 23 minutes. Almost all of them basically went past 50 minutes. So, credit where credit's due. He didn't half battle. Calvin, you said as soon as it happened that it was disappointing for him. It's obviously gutting to get ill at any tournament, but he did say better here than at Wimbledon.
Yeah, I didn't know he was ill, actually, because I only have Eurosport, and they chose to not show any of it.
Incredibly.
So, yes, I didn't know he was ill. I was just following on live score, and there was a lot of breaks of serve in it. I think he might have been a breakup in the 3rd set as well.
Yes.
When he lost 6-2.
Right,
but yeah, it's a shame for Evo, but yeah, like I said, I think anything he got at the French would have been a bonus. I
think the frustration is he has, I mean, and this still amazes me, this stat, he has never won a match at the French Open before, and then he plonked through first round in straight sets, and this was 70% Evo at best. He should have beaten him, and all right, he probably would have lost to Tsitsipas in the 3rd round, but that's a lot of points and a lot of cash, for a guy who doesn't think he can play on clay.
Yeah, and especially on the point situation, because we know what's coming in a few weeks. And he made 4th round last time. Yeah, last year, I think. So, yeah, he said he's going to play Nottingham Challenger, didn't he? So, that Nottingham tends to turn into almost like an ATP 250 at this stage, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The way Tsitsipas is playing, there's no guarantee he wouldn't have given him a good game there fit at the minute.
Well, similarly, Mikael
hard
Ymer,
for himself.
frankly. I mean, Tsitsipas not doing the job of cruising through the early rounds, unlike Cameron Norrie, who pretty much just, I mean, as Calvin said the other day, there's no such thing as an easy Cam Norrie win because of the way he plays, but he hasn't dropped a set, he hasn't been pushed to a tiebreak. I think he's only lost 17 games so far, so that's a positive for him. We obviously lost Emma Raducanu to Alexandra Sasnovich in the second round. Watson and Dart out comfortably in round one. I sort of think if we were to do a report card for the Brits, assuming that Norrie gets to the fourth round and loses to Alcaraz,
that's a big assumption.
Well, isn't it?
I'd give him a 55 to 60% favourite rating for that match. I still think Hachanov's a good player. Right. I mean, it's certainly not a heavy favourite for that match.
Okay,
but
say he gets to the third and a half round. I mean, what do we rate the British effort at the French Open out of 10, George?
Yeah, okay.
Compared to expectations.
We kind of picked out Sasnovich might be a player Raducanu loses to, but she's good enough to have reached the fourth round here. So, I'd give her a C, to be honest.
A C out of 10. Yeah, fair enough, mate.
So, did we go for a 10? What's a C equate to? I don't. Is that a 4 or a 5? Right, okay. A 5. A 5.
I always think when I'm doing player ratings in football, 6 is like straight. Like 6 is just.
Okay, I think slightly below 6 then. I'd say 5. 5 for Raducanu.
But if you were to give the Brits as a whole, like the British contingent,
I'm giving you my average across and rating each one.
George, it's an hour-long podcast.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's still about a 5 or a 6, isn't it? I mean, it depends on how well Norrie does, but Britain the second week of the French Open is typically about as good as it's going to get when you're without Andy Murray.
Our Andy, yeah. Let's move on. I mean, let's not forget, the doubles guys are, legitimate threats all round. I mean, Neil Skupski and Wes Kuloff have looked incredibly comfortable and have a very decent chance. Joe Salisbury and Raji Ram have only played one match, but they obviously won in straight sets because they're just elite. So, there are chances of titles.
And Lloyd Glasspool and Harry Oliveira beat the two-time winners.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw the draw and I thought, oh, hello, Kravitz and Mies, like not an easy draw there. And yeah, they beat them 6-4, 6-2. So who knows?
I think they've won it twice, haven't they? Kravitz and Mies.
Does he not usually play with Putz, or have I made that up?
No, that was because Mies was injured.
I see. In which case I could say yes. George?
I think Murray and Suarez won comfortably first round as well, didn't they?
Yeah, they absolutely did.
1 and 2?
I actually spoke to Bruno Suarez after that, so I really should remember. But we weren't really talking about tennis, to be honest. We were talking about how much he hates being on the Players' Council, mostly, because he's been on it for 8 years, and the last 3 years have been absolute hell. So
Last 3? That's limiting it, I think. Probably exactly. Last 5 or 6.
He says he is done, to say the least. But there's a lot to be said about that, but we don't have time. Let's start looking forward, shall we? We have a full set of third round matches because out of nowhere, Yelena Ostapenko just lost to Elise Cornet, which is a real shame because I was quite looking forward to Yelena Ostapenko against Iga Swiatek because Swiatek has never beaten Yelena Ostapenko in 3 meetings. And now we're not going to get that, and Swiatek isn't going to face a seeded player potentially until, guaranteed until the quarterfinal, and perhaps even later. So the women's draw certainly is opening up. Swiatek has played 4 sets. She has lost 4 games. She is on fire. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. I don't think we've learned anything about her from those matches. So I'm actually not even going to offer my fellow podcasters the chance to talk about Iga Swiatek. I guarantee George will crowbar her into an answer later, but I don't want to hear it. Of Nadal and Djokovic, Calvin, which do you think has had the more impressive start? There were question marks over both of them coming in, albeit larger ones over Rafa. Which of them do you feel more comfortable with now?
I don't think you can say which of them you would feel more comfortable with because they've both breezed through comfortably. But I think what I would say is there were more questions about Nadal than there was about Djokovic, and I think he's answered them very strongly.
I mean, it's been a good draw. He's obviously faced Jordan Thompson and Corentin Moutet. He's now got Botic van der Zandschulp in the third round. George, are you still quite happy that Nadal is fit and firing and ready to compete at the highest level when inevitably he faces Djokovic in the quarterfinal?
That's going to be acid test. I think the thing is at the minute is even if a top level Nadal turns up against a top level Djokovic, there's no guarantee he's going to win that match. I mean, Djokovic is playing really good stuff. I've watched a little bit of his match with Molcan, who, by the way,
I'm reliably informed.
He's actually a really nice player. Got a lot about him. Coached by Vida as well. But yeah, I mean, he just looks sharp at every single match I watch of him, Novak, at the minute, and you can just see him dialing in. So yeah, I wouldn't say I'm confident he'll win the tournament, but I'm having watched everyone else so far, I think he's still the man to beat.
I think what I'll say on Nadal was that when I say he's answered positively, his problem is as the tournament goes on. I don't think it's a case, right, he's fit in the first 2 rounds, so we're all good to go. I think it's more how long can he maintain without his injury becoming a problem. It's his foot, is it?
Yeah. And he's not hiding from the fact it's a problem. It's about how it feels on a given day, and if it's even lingering there as a doubt, and he's got to play a fully fit, fully firing Djokovic, you can pretty much imagine Djokovic will pull that foot injury out of him if it's not resolved, which it's probably not going to be. So
well, it's not. I think it's a genetic degenerative disease. It's not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. So yeah, look, I'm still pretty comfortable with Djokovic as the man to beat.
He's got Aliash Bedene in the next round, followed by either Dimitrov or Schwartzman, which I have to say feels like pretty much the perfect draw for him.
Schwartzman is one of those players who can drag you to a bit of an awkward 4th or 5th set here.
Oh yeah, you don't need to tell Jaume Munar, who he beat in the previous round, in 5 sets. I mean, I feel like Schwartzman I would like to bet on him going to 5 sets in the first 3 rounds of every Grand Slam. I should point out, he hasn't taken a set. In their 5 previous meetings, he has only twice taken a set or more off Djokovic. They went to 5 in the French 5 years ago, and he got a set off him in Rome 3 years ago. But their 3 previous meetings have been incredibly one-sided. So even if he gets there. Nadal, as I mentioned, faces Van der Zandschulp, and then either Felix Auger-Aliassime or Filip Krajinovic. Felix Auger-Aliassime, by the way, played one of the worst opening matches I've ever seen.
It was dreadful, wasn't it?
I mean, because it was not only
how bad it was.
Him playing badly, it was also bad to watch. It was 5 sets. He was awful for 2 sets against Varillas, the Peruvian. He then won the next 3 sets, 1, 3, and 3. And it was just like, this is an enormous waste of everyone's time.
We sort of mentioned this off air before we started, but that's been a kind of recurring theme of a lot of the men's matches this time, where, Tsitsipas, Zverev just played dreadfully for a while and then suddenly lock themselves in and kind of get all the way. Okay, the Zverev match and even Alcaraz's match, which wasn't quite the same against Ramos Vinolas, had its kind of tense moments in the 5th, but there's not been too many matches I've watched where 2 players have caught fire throughout, and it's been a really, really good high-level contest. But I'm willing to hear answers from our listeners if I've missed such matches so far.
Well, it is possible. There are a hell of a lot of matches. I mean, for example, I was following vaguely the Ugo Humbert Emil Ruusuvuori match, which was 5 sets and pretty ding-dong. I think, it went Ruusuvuori 1-1, then Humbert 1-2, and then Ruusuvuori 1-2. And they're both players I really enjoy watching, and had it not been the first round of a slam and therefore the busiest day of the year, I probably would have gone and watched it, but I couldn't. Stefanos Tsitsipas dropped first 2 sets to Lorenzo Musetti. He has just finished in the last couple of minutes and beaten the Czech qualifier, who I put to Calvin yesterday in the assumption that he might know who he was, and he didn't. But
that was a highlight of the bottlets, actually. Rare. Calvin got nothing to say.
Zdeněk Kolar, he did take a set off Tsitsipas, and he did have a big lead in the fourth set tiebreak, but unfortunately couldn't convert it to take that match to 5. I think he had a 6-3 lead in the fourth set tiebreak, and Tsitsipas won the next 6 points to take the match. George?
I think, yeah, if we're kind of analysing the draw at the minute, both men's and women's, I think the big question is who's going to take advantage of these wide open bottom halves. And, you know, before the tournament, we'd have been sitting here saying Tsitsipas is definitely the guy who's going to kind of come through this bottom half. But if you're guys like Ruud, even Medvedev, Kecmanovic, Sinner even, you've got to be really fancying your chances of getting to the final of this thing. He looks totally out of sorts, Tsitsipas. Like, he's dialed in slightly against Musetti, but Calvin was saying yesterday, Musetti just mentally went from that match. But yeah, I've been really unimpressed with Tsitsipas so far. I think people have fancied their chances on that side.
Having watched them both the last few days, I think Medvedev's going to make the final from that half now. I'd make him favourite over Tsitsipas. Just because, I mean, he's got Tsitsipas' number as well, in general.
Yeah. Daniil Medvedev has beaten Facundo Bagnis and Laszlo Djere, all in straight sets, and really not even with a tiebreak, you know, just cruising. He's got Maimir Kecmanovic in the next round.
I think that'll be a good match. I think that'll be a real test of where Medvedev's at. I'm not as convinced as Calvin that Medvedev's definitely there. You know, I think he's had a good draw first 2 rounds. I think if he comes through that, then yeah, I'll be with Calvin that I think Medvedev's probably the favourite to get to the final from there.
He'll face either Gilles Simon, who just doesn't want to retire, or Marin Cilic in the 4th round, assuming he gets through Kecmanovic. Further up the draw, just the next section up, is Rublev against Garin and Mackenzie McDonald against Yannick Sinner. I think Rublev is vulnerable there. He dropped a set to Kwon and to Delbonis. He absolutely lost his mind in both matches in various ways. He actually apologised. He smashed a ball into his bench, which then rebounded and knocked the lad who was dragging the court's hat off. And he said afterwards it was unprofessional, it was unacceptable, and I hope it never happens again. He then broke all sorts of rackets against Delbonis. There were countless ball abuse code violations. I think Garin, as a clay court specialist and a man who's doing very well for my fantasy team, has a real shot there.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a tough match. I mean, it's funny how much Rublev's losing his head in that match with Delbonis. I mean, the scoreline, you look at it, it's like 6-3, 3-6, 6-2, 6-3. That's not really a match that really warrants you to completely go bananas, if you like. But I was just going to say, I think we keep talking a little bit about Sinner and whether he's really ready to kind of take that next step up. This is a 4 he's got to come through, I think. Like, he's very capable on clay. He should beat Mackenzie McDonald. Rublev's out of form. Garin's a good clay court player, but he's got the power to hit through him. And then, you know, if it is Medvedev in the quarterfinals, Medvedev's not as comfortable on clay as the top guys. Sinner's got to be going into that match believing I've got a great shot here. And if he can somehow get through that, then who knows?
Stefanos Tsitsipas' likely quarterfinal opponent, based on seedings and my gut, is Casper Ruud.
David Goffin, surely part of that team.
David Goffin's got Hubert Hurkacz to deal with first, who I think is a very tough customer. Casper Ruud's not someone I think lots of people know lots about, Calvin. He works for Eurosport on the telly during most tournaments, which I find quite unusual. But he beat Emil Rusevori, by the way, in the all-use matchup in straight sets as well, relatively comfortably. He must, I mean, is he someone who could beat, like, if you were to match up Tsitsipas and Ruud today, would you give him a decent chance?
In general, no. I'd give him more of a chance at the minute because I say Tsitsipas is playing not great, but when it matters, he's playing really well. Like when it's really got to the crux, he's playing good. I mean, I watched the end of, I didn't see the whole of the match today, but I got in at the end of it. Just when I think I got him when Kolar was 6-3 up in the tiebreak, and from that point, Tsitsipas played well. He came through it, and I'd still make him favourite over Ruud, to be fair. Ruud's a solid player, but you say he works for Eurosport. Does he commentate?
I think he does sort of punditry stuff. They're always plugging him quite hard.
Right.
I think on his days off he just zooms in, or maybe even comes on site and does a bit of just punditry. I mean, I guess why not? It's something different. It's, change of pace.
It's kind of like what Ronnie O'Sullivan does with the snooker.
He commentates in his own matches, Ronnie O'Sullivan.
Yeah, true.
I mean, making the dangerous assumption, Tsitsipas is going to beat Ema, regardless of how badly or well he is playing. I mean, I'd be quite keen to see him against Gaston in the next round if Gaston can come through Rune. I mean, Rune had a little bit of an injury problem, didn't he? But I think Gaston's
I'm reliably
such a
informed
wonderful.
he's fine.
He pulled out doubles, didn't he? So I guess it's we'll see how he goes. But I mean, Gaston's a wonderful player to watch. I really love watching him. He's got one of the most fantastic drop shots, and the French crowd behind him, they always just get so up for it. So I think that would be a really interesting match. I mean, he's still back Tsitsipas, but that'll be a bloody entertaining match if you get there. I mean, I caught his win over de Minaur, which the tie break in that just was electric. The crowd was amazing. That probably is the best part of a match I've watched so far, to be fair.
I have to say it's so important for the tournament that the French do well. And we joke about French tennis a lot, but it has made things so much buzzier that Hugo Gaston's through to the third round, that Jean-Jean's picking up wins, that I know exactly Elise Cornet now into the third round, having beaten Yelena Ostapenko, and frankly has a really good draw and probably should or could get through.
Gilles Simon, they're all
Gilles Simon, the man who doesn't want to retire. Yeah, it has made Roland Garros more exciting, and we're forgetting about Diane Parry, by the way, who knocked out the defending champion and then beat Camelia Osorio. She got Sloane Stephens in the next round, and I'm not writing off Diane Parry in the third round there. To mean that we might end up with like a Grand Slam quarterfinal that is Diane Parry against Kaya Kanepi, which I'm here for, quite frankly, entirely. But who knows? George, sorry, you had something to say.
I was going to just ask you both. So if you're talking your men's quarterfinals right now, presumably we're all going Djokovic, Nadal, Alcaraz, Zverev.
Yes, I would like to think Zverev's got a loss in him, but he's playing Brandon Nakashima, and then either Isner or
draw's good, isn't it?
Zapata Morales, and it's like I love Bernabé Zapata Morales, but he ain't beating Zverev.
Probably Alcaraz is more vulnerable against Korda. I mean, I'd still expect him to come through.
Yeah, probably. And then bottom half, I mean, I struggle to see Ruud losing to Sonego or Goffin/Hurkacz. And much as I think Tsitsipas isn't playing very well, I think Calvin's right there in the clutch moments. And then Sinner Medvedev, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that'd be a pretty good lineup if we get that.
I think so. The women's, it looks less likely. Just because I know you don't all have the draw in front of you. Swiatek will be in the quarterfinals. I've actually already, the tournament have already confirmed that.
I mean, it's astonishing. Like, she doesn't need an easy draw anyway at the minute, but
she's got a staggering,
it's a glorious draw. Badosa, you have to think probably the other in the next quarter.
Swiatek needs an opponent in the quarterfinal. Which
you're actually going to make us guess that Pegula?
Well, so your choices are Pegula, Zidanšek, Irina-Camelia Begu, more on her later, and Loelia Jean-Jean. I mean,
I'd love Jean-Jean. That would be great.
I mean, it'd be amazing.
As a storyline.
Just not going to happen.
Pegula, all jokes aside, is having a pretty good year. I think.
Yeah.
I'd see her through.
And then Badosa we would expect to come through and then face. Well, you've got a choice of Shelby Rogers, Daria Kasatkina, Kamia Georgi, or Arina Sabalenka.
I hope Sabalenka gets there. It'd be nice to start getting some of these guys we know are at the top of the game. But
I can't tell you how badly she played against Paquet in the first round. Honestly, she was 6-2 down. She lost the first set 6-2. And I would have put my house on her getting battered for the rest of the match. And, she pulled it out, but it was one of those matches where she just has much bigger weapons. And then she battered Madison Brengle, in fairness, which is, it's doable, I suppose. But she's playing Kamia Georgi in the third round, and I dread to think what's going to happen there.
I couldn't believe yesterday, you guys, in one of the just moving on to the next quarter, when I was hearing you guys saying you thought Kerber was going to reach the quarterfinal of this section, I was screaming. That was
I'm not sure I said that.
I heard James say it. I was like, I swear, like Anisimova kickking around in there, and
yeah, we said Anisimova, didn't we?
I said that Kerber was going to get to the quarterfinal, and she will.
Okay, that's a big back.
Well, I'm looking at the draw, and I can see that she doesn't play Anisimova until the quarterfinal. Kerber's playing Sasnovich in the third round.
Fair enough.
And then either Trevisan or Saville Gavrilova.
Fair enough. I may have misunderstood.
Yeah.
Trevisan could beat her.
Yeah, okay. If you say so. I have faith. I have faith.
That'll be my big prediction this week.
Angelina's
that Trevisan gets to that
slam.
quarterfinal.
Angelina's career slam is on. Section 6 is really where it's at, because the four players in the third round of Section 6 are Belinda Bencic, Leylah Fernandez, Amanda Anisimova, and Karolina Muchova. I mean, that could be a semi-final lineup in a good slam.
Yeah, I like all four of them. I think Muchova's more dangerous than people realise, but it's got to be Anisimova, I think, at the minute on form, and the fact I've backed her all year long for my young player of the year.
Quite interested to see Leylah Fernandez in there, though. You know, she's not someone we think of as a clay court player, or really any sort of player. She's had real struggles, you know, since the US Open final. So it's quite interesting to see her there, and I think that match against Bencic will be another real kind of proper test of where she is. Yeah, I agree with me. Yeah, brilliant. What I mean.
Paul Calvin might go in there.
I'm just watching because in the background here, I've got Eurosport on, and I don't know why I'm changing the subject slightly. We come back to it. Why they do this weird thing with the hologram interviews?
Yeah, the cube.
It's so strange. Like
it's incredibly odd.
Yeah,
I don't have an answer. But we can't come back to it because I don't have an answer for that. Like, it's bizarre. And then the bottom sections, you've got a quarter-finalist, one of Gracheva, Elise Mertens, Coco Gauff, Kai Kanepi. I think we're all picking Coco Gauff there, aren't we?
Yeah.
Gauff or Kanepi, but yeah, I hope Gauff. It'd be really good for this tournament to have Gauff getting into the quarterfinals. That's one of the players I want there as a storyline. She's not had a great year, but still would be good.
I got reminded of how great she is the other day when there was this horrible shooting in Texas, which people will have heard about and I know won't want to think about. But Coco Gauff was so forthright and so measured on it, talking about how
she's eloquent.
She's incredibly eloquent. Well. You know, for a kid, like an absolute kid. What is she? Is she 18 yet? She's just graduated high school. I know that. She's indeed 18. Absolutely incredible. So, yeah, all power to her. And then from the bottom section, I've already mentioned it. You've had time to think about it. Diane Parry, Sloane Stephens, Jill Teichmann, Victoria Azarenka.
I'd say Parry's the fourth seed, unfortunately, as much as I like it. I think Teichmann.
So my model really likes Teichmann. It's always valued Teichmann quite highly, and it's why I picked her in fantasy. Because she's got a decent clay court record. She's got some quite good wins on clay. It's her first French Open third round. That's my only slight concern. And she hasn't. I mean, it's her first Grand Slam third round. I think I'm right in saying. Like, this is not far off the biggest match of her life. Playing Victoria Azarenka, who has had a lot of matches in her life.
Yeah, I mean, it's never been any great shakes on the clay, Azarenka, but she is coming through, and obviously that experience does count. But I think I've seen Teichmann have a few really impressive runs over the last year or so, and yeah, I fancy her. I fancy her in that section. Unless Stephens just turns it on out of nowhere, which is always possible.
And Sloane Stephens is good for the tournament, isn't she? Right, we're going to keep moving on because, I mean, there are loads of things we could talk about in terms of background to the tournament. If you follow me on Twitter, you know there's been a lot of talk about Wimbledon and the spat with the ATP and WTA and everything to do with that. I think we're going to need potentially a whole pod on this after the French Open, so I'm tempted to kind of leave it because there will be many more developments over the next 10 days. I will tell you this, I've spoken to a lot of people today involved in both tours and Wimbledon, and there are a lot of very angry people and a lot of people saying the word compromise, and not meaning it. I would be very surprised if we get a compromise at Wimbledon and the current set of affairs is not the state of affairs when Wimbledon comes around. And I'll leave it at that. We've talked about the PTPA and Djokovic and Benoit pair, so we'll move on to the only thing anyone's talking about today, which is Irina-Camelia Begu. If you haven't seen this, she was playing Ekaterina Alexandrova, and she was walking to her chair having had her serve broken, and she threw the racket towards her chair, and it bounced in front of the racket, hit a sort of clay trampoline, I assume, because it was an outrageous bounce, and it leapt over the chair into the crowd, and it's unclear what happened, but it appeared to hit a spectator, potentially a small child. It wasn't entirely obvious. The statement from the FFT reads as follows. After losing her service game while walking to the player bench, Irina-Camelia Begu threw her racket onto the ground. The racket bounced over the bench into the spectators area. Yeah, fine. The racket accidentally ended up in the spectators area where it brushed a young spectator. Brushed. After the initial scare, the spectator turned out to be okay. The Grand Slam supervisor spoke with the parents who were with the child, and the parents confirmed that the child was fine and not injured. According to the procedures, a code violation for unsportsmanlike conduct was issued. Now, I've read the Grand Slam handbook, and there's no clear kind of guidance on this kind of stuff. But what that statement would suggest is that they genuinely awarded the punishment on the basis of the injury caused, which feels a bit sort of arbitrary to me.
Yeah, it's mental. Look, in terms of like force of throw of the racket, it really isn't, the worst thing you'll ever see in your life. But if you're at the point where you're letting people lob things into the crowd in a kind of dangerous, uncontrolled way, just don't really think that should be on at all. So yeah, I was astonished she wasn't disqualified, to be honest.
Calvin, I'm sure you've seen a lot worse on tours around the world, and disqualifications for less. It must have surprised you.
Yeah, I've seen worse for sure.
But people get DQ'd, right?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, you'd have to get DQ'd there. I mean, I don't know. She could just do what Kyrgios seems to think is fine all the time and offer to give the kid a racket and then bang on about how much he gives to tennis and how popular he is. That seems to be just the get out for any racket abuse that he does. So I don't know why Begu just didn't do that.
She said afterwards that she was sorry, and then someone asked her a follow-up question. She said, I don't really want to talk about it anymore, which seemed reasonable. Ekaterina Alexandrova didn't do press, apparently because no one requested her, because we didn't know that this was going to happen. And there are no Russian media at Roland Garros, so obviously they didn't request her. But she posted on Instagram. Instagram. Joyous. So disappointed to leave RG like that. I was trying to do my best, but seems like the rules were against me today. This shouldn't be happening. I hope after today's match, rules will be improved for everyone's safety. We are responsible for our racket. And someone said to me, what's going to happen for someone to have like a serious head injury or maybe even permanent damage for this to really make a difference? I mean, how hard do you have to throw a racket to do serious damage to someone?
Off the floor as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a bit hand-wringy to sort of say, oh, someone's going to have to die for us to make a change here. But I do think that the rules need codifying, where it's like, if you'd be very easy to make a rule that says, if you throw your racket not while attempting a shot and it goes into the crowd, this is what happens to you. Now, I'm not here to say whether you should be DQ'd or you get like a double code violation or whatever, but it's a very easy rule to write, right?
I think I'm not too fussed about the racket one. The balls one is more of an issue when they're whacking balls around, because that you only need to catch one wrong, as we saw with Shapovalov with the umpire, where it can cause serious damage.
The racket fractured his eye socket, I believe that was.
Yeah. The one with the rackets one's just a much of a it's just a bit of a nonsense. Like people talk about serious head injuries and people dying, like impossible.
Yeah, all right, Alex Ferguson. Yeah, exactly. What I don't get, I don't get why the rules aren't clearer. But what I also don't get is why players, and I seem to remember Shapovalov said this earlier in the week, funnily enough, they're like, oh no, we need to be allowed a way to release anger. I was like, what? Like, no. Like, leave it out, mate.
In fairness, right, and I guess I'm kind of speculating here, but the rules were on rackets. The rules were always quite standard that if you broke a racket, you'd get a code violation. And then that changed around Serena Williams breaking a racket and then claiming that she was being treated unfairly for getting a code violation for breaking a racket. So that now seems to have changed, that you don't always get one when you break a racket, and you can get one without breaking a racket.
So it's that weird thing where there are some things you definitely can't do, but then there's a whole world of other things that you can't do that are just discretionary. So there are some specific rules about breaking a racket, and you get fined for that, right? Like that's something that happens, but that doesn't. The Grand Slam handbook doesn't have like specifics on the code violations of that. Like it doesn't say if you break a racket, that's a code violation. The fine system says you shall not angrily hit, kick, or throw. Like, but it doesn't really say like what the sort of what the hard and fast rules of that are. It's totally discretionary, basically, and players like that because it means they can argue with umpires about it.
I think something should be left to the umpires as well. That's umpiring. If you can see a player's out of control and they're breaking a racket and they're wavering on this guy's or this woman is out of control, then I think maybe dish one out. But if you think they're in control and they've just rammed a racket and broke it, then give them a bit off. But it has to lie with the umpire, though. You can't, like I say, the problem was when Serena Williams and Nick Kyrgios both start thinking that they shouldn't get code violations for anything at all.
I think a lot of the thing around the actual racket smashing, the argument goes is about little pieces that could fly off and like go in people's eyes and stuff, which I know sounds maybe a bit ridiculous, but if you can kind of see that happening if someone's like smashing it on a hoarding and a little bit of the racket frays and goes into the eye, something like that. But I still think I don't see, like, while I take the point that no one's going to die from what Begu did today, I still think fans should probably be able to go and watch matches in the knowledge that players are going to be punished if they intentionally kind of release a racket in anger and it's coming into the crowd. I think some sort of missile rule should probably be in there.
And I also think that players should be able to get through a whole match without actually losing it. Like, every sport has rules about like being a twat. Like, that's basically what it is. Like, just like, don't be a twat. Like, if you want to get angry, like, just get angry. Like, I sometimes get angry at work. I've never broken anything at work. Like, if I broke something at work, people would think I had a problem, and like that would be true of anyone.
I kind of think though that there's a drama to it as well. I understand what you're saying, and you're right. But then, look, tennis's biggest ever star is John McEnroe. And that was when tennis was at its most popular. And there was a specific reason, although he was maybe the most brilliant talent we've ever seen, that wasn't the reason he was a star. And that wasn't the reason that tennis was as popular as it was in the early to mid 80s.
Yeah, You Cannot Be Serious really changed things at that point, in fairness. I think there's a lot to be said for both sides. I just wish people wouldn't like act like a tit and then complain when people call them out for it.
Just slightly changing subject, James, something I wanted to ask you as someone there. What is the vibe amongst the players and there's people around tournament with the Russian players who are there? Is there an atmosphere or?
No, I think it's been pretty good. I mean, the French crowd will boo anyone, so they're not discriminating on that grounds. Evo got booed today because he basically tanked the last point of the match, like despite the fact he was quite obviously ill and had actually tried really hard for the whole thing. And it's been funny. I think they've been just pretty popular. I was actually commenting on it to someone when Irina Sabalenka was getting mobbed after her match for autographs and stuff, and the same with Medvedev and Rublev, and I think Kotov was here earlier in the week, and no one seems that bothered really. I think, much as you've often said, like they're just their mates and they appreciate that they're not really part of it. The Ukrainian players, I think it is different. Like, they have been very open and very moving, speaking about what's going on, and and their personal plight, because a lot of them have been really personally affected, obviously. So that's changed things, but yeah, I don't think there's been anything particularly ugly, and I do genuinely mean it. The French will boo anyone.
I think a couple of things on that. I mean, I think with the Russian players, like I said, they're mates, and I think strangely, well, not strangely, I guess now it's changed a lot in that I think Medvedev and Khachanov in particular, and Rublev to a degree, they're quite popular guys on the tour. They're not loners, and they're friendly with a lot of the players.
Yeah.
On the other thing where you say the fans booing, the French are so weird on this because they hate people tanking, like they hate it, like the crowd, and they'll boo anything, which is strange because there's no country's players that tank more than French players. and to the extent where on tour we started when we're traveling, like we started calling a tank the French cramp, because every time a French player starts tanking, obviously in a match, and the umpire will warn them, you've got to start trying more, they always go, I've got cramp. so it's, we now call it, the French cramp. When somebody's tanking, they've got the French cramp.
Superb. I'm going to start using that. I think that's all we've got time for. It's been a really busy one. George, you're desperate to say something.
Well, on your account, James, you're having a wonderful fantasy run. I can't believe you've gone 59 minutes or whatever without saying that.
Oh, I alluded to it when we talk about Jill Teichmann, don't worry. Yeah, I'm third in fantasy. James Gray, tennis expert.
Who's number one? We better big them up.
Diego Punto de Break, congratulations, number one by half a point. And then Game Set Match and Nole, who I don't know who they support, but I think we're a tennis fan.
We're confirmed that Calvin's going to finish last in this.
So between the three of us, his Rush team has not come off well. And
I need a madness from Goff and Goffan, don't I? Do you have Goff actually, James?
No, I don't have Goff or Goffan. Okay. So
there we go.
There you go.
Goff or to Goffan.
Head to our Twitter and you'll be able to check on your progress. Head to our page and leave us a rating and a review, and head there to get our daily podlets from the French Open. It's all we've got time for. Please do come back again, and thanks very much for listening.
Social Podcast Network.